little whack-a-mole thing. I'm gonna get it. Okay, you guys, hi, my name is Paige. It is good to be with you. Y'all, I am so excited for the sermon that we're gonna get into tonight, but you guys also need to know that tomorrow is Damien's birthday. So, there is nothing that cringes me more than a long everybody singing happy birthday. So we're just gonna yell like you guys have already been warmed up on the top of your lungs, 1, 2, 3, happy birthday. Just those words. Please don't sing it, okay? We're just gonna sing that happy birthday, not sing it. Yell it, happy birthday, Damien. Where are you right now? He's in the back. Okay, ready? So just again, instructions for a large group of people. 1, 2, 3, happy birthday, Damien. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Damien! Tomorrow. Any other birthdays in the room? Happy birthday to you too. But tonight, celebrate him. He likes the Instagram, that kind of stuff. You at Damien East or whatever. Okay, we love you. We are so thankful for you and you pastoring this space. So, guys, tonight, we are in a book, and it has been like such an intense personal wrestle in my life right now. And then I got this assignment from Damien and was like, holy moly, God is meeting me in this personal wrestle and this question. And I don't know if this is a question that you guys are asking at this point in your lives as well, but I have a lot of questions for God. I love him, I trust him, I believe that he has made all things, I believe he has purposed me to live life with him, all great, like check, box, yes. But I am so curious right now for God, like how are you actually working around me? Like what are you up to? Because sometimes it might seem like he is hidden, it might seem like he is absent, it might seem like he is playing tricks on me, but I wanna know, God, what are you doing? We have this question on purpose, and I think so much of us, like, we want to cooperate with what God is doing around us. We want to cooperate with the purposes that he has placed before us. We want to say yes. I'm someone who wants to look around and see, like, look at what God has done. Let's celebrate it together. Let's honor it. Let's say, like, that God is doing big things in our community and around us and in our world and in my life. Like, I want to see God on the move. But if we look at a lot of these scriptures and a lot of these books in the New Testament, like God's power is on divine display, but it's pretty obvious, right? Like Gideon, he puts the fleece out and the water and all these things happen, and you're like, that has to be God. And Elijah, we talked about him last week. Y'all go back, watch all of these, they're so good. Elijah, he like calls down and God brings fire and it lights up like this soaking wet altar. Like that is God. The Moses situation, a plague comes, it's obvious, like there is God. But my life, personally, it seems like a lot of normal sequences of events that lead to certain things, and you wonder, what is God doing? Like, is this God? Is this not? I'm personally really have had something happen in my life. I don't know if you guys have ever been here. Recently, my husband, who's here right now, hi, Austin. I didn't ask him I could share this story, so here we go, fun car ride home. We're driving separate, it's fine. But kind of had this crazy moment, this huge bill came that was completely unexpected. Like showed up and we're like, okay, that is a lifestyle-changing amount of money that has to be paid for this thing that came up. And so we're kind of like, whoa, literally the next morning, we've been working on this like one thing, this neighbor was gonna pay something. We were expecting that in a while something would maybe come through financially for us, and literally the next morning, to the exact amount of what that first part of that like unexpected bill came, the exact amount, I got a text, hey, come pick up a check for this much money. Like the exact amount, okay? So I am over here like, God, this was so stressful, and almost immediately, you have come through in the exact way. Like God gives he's so in the details, he's so abundantly beyond anything we could ever imagine. We pick it up, I'm like, I have to tell the world, like this is a really crummy situation that we're in, this bill was really crummy, but like look at God, like he's coming through. And I did. I told people about it. I was so excited to celebrate God, because why wouldn't you? Like right? Yeah, until 3 weeks later, we get a text, hey, I have to pull out of the deal. Can you give me that check back? And by the way, we're never going to finish the deal. It's not coming. Anybody ever praised God for something that then seemed like it was all of a sudden a turn? And you're like, wait, I really wanted to see God moving somewhere. I really wanted to celebrate him in something. But all of a sudden, it feels like I just got it all wrong. Where is he? Is he a part of this? Is this a coincidence? Is he playing tricks on me? What's going on? And so I join you, Jordan family, coming from not Miss Pastor Preacher Paige up here, but as someone who is genuinely I want to know, God, what are you doing? Where are you working? How does this work, God? Because I trust you, I believe you, I know you've got things in the end, but in the meantime, what's that look like? And we're going to get into a book of the Bible tonight that honestly, if you would have asked me a couple weeks ago if I wanted to teach it, I would have been like, what, with some flowery women's study on something? And in searching, have come to a point where there is a book of the Bible where God's not even mentioned. His name's not even said. Very deliberately, the author did not just happen to leave this out. Deliberately, we see God move in a sequence of events. Some of these events are even morally ambiguous. They seem coincidental. And yet, through these sequences of events, through these little movements, through these just coincidental happenstances, through a character development of somebody very important in God's story, who started out kind of missing it, that God happened to save the entire people of Judaism and the people of Israel from genocide. So we're going to get tonight into the book of Esther, and I am so excited to share her story because this is such a remarkable story. And for me, as someone who's I'm seeing life right now as just kind of a normal sequence of events, where is God here? And so if you guys will join me, we're going to be opening up the book of Esther, and she's kind of hard for me to find. So I personally, when I had to go looking for her, I had to open to the beginning and find what page she was on. But the book of Esther is going to be in your New Old Testament. If you get to the Psalms, you've gone too far, and it's going to be right between Nehemiah and Job. So if you guys want to turn there with me, and we're going to get to reading a part of this that I want to take some takeaways for us, looking at kind of what does this say about Esther and us as a community of the Jordan, and then for you and for me. But I'm just going to tell you guys her story. To me, it is a remarkable, remarkable story. So everybody in Esther, just say, yes, we're good, okay? Okay, we're going to get there. Okay, yeah, okay. We're going to get there soon. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about her story. And so the people of Judaism, people of Israel, all the Jews, so there's this thing called the diaspora, which has happened because a while back in the story, the people of Israel were taken and they were exiles in Babylon. If you guys remember Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar and all that, the people of Israel were taken to a foreign nation, and this is kind of still people of Israel not living in Israel. It's called the diaspora. And so they are now, this place has been taken, and it's now called Persia. Persia is a place now, at this point in time, power, wealth. They have conquered most of the known land, and the king at this time in Esther's part of her story is King Xerxes. And he is, of course, if he is leading the place that is of wealth and power and just flash, that is him. And he has now, at the start of this book, he has invited all of his top officials to come and be in the palace for 180 days. And for these 180 days, all that's happening is he wants to parade his wealth. He's going to bring every piece of livestock that belongs to him. He's going to bring every mineral or gold or anything flashy. And for 180 days, he's going to throw this party. And he's just going to show off his wealth to all these people who come to his house. That's crazy. So one of these nights, he is hosting this party. It says that all of these men at this party have now partaken in drunkenness, and he decides he's going to invite his queen because he is the most beautiful queen in the land. Her name is Queen Vashti, and he wants her to come and parade around at his party to show off all that he has, and one of those things, those possessions that he has, is his queen. Well, Queen Vashti says, I'm not going to be a part of that. She stands up and she says, no, I'm not showing up. Which at this point, especially in an honor-shame culture situation, like this was not going to go well for her. Queen Vashti gets banished, okay? So the drunken party happens. She doesn't want to show up and be paraded around all in front of all these drunken men. And she says, nope. And then King Xerxes says, you got to go. So he banishes her. She's done. This is I really don't like this story for you, okay? For any of us. King Xerxes then says, he sends people out and he says, bring back the most 1,000 beautiful virgins you can find in the land of Persia. So now, 1,000 women, if you would guess, they weren't take me, taken from their homes, brought to the palace, and are now kind of in this position where out of these 1,000 women, there's really 4 things that can happen to them. They're each going to get a night with the king. So they're going to go through 1 year of beauty treatments. Again, at this point in Persia, everything is about appearance. Everything is about appearance. What do things look like? How, for men, how do they show off their wealth and their power? And for women, it's all about their physical beauty and appearance, their sexuality. And so they go through 1 year before they get to go before the king. They go through 1 year of intensive beauty treatments to make themselves fit exactly what that culture defines as beauty for that time. So they have a year to go through that. And so at the end of that, the 4 women, they get to, there's 4 things can happen. They can go in for their one night. Then he hates them, and they get banished. Okay, that could happen. They could go in for their one night, and they could come away and still live in the palace, but never be called on again, which is kind of its own form of banishment. Then, if you're kind of, you could be called on every once in a while to go visit with the king, visit. And it's going to be a special time. And every once in a while, you're just kind of living in the palace, and every once in a while, you go and do that. The other 2 options are you could become one of his wives. You're not just in the harem, you become one of his wives. And at that point, your children are somewhat heirs to the throne. But 1 woman out of the 1,000 will be chosen, and she will be named queen. There's this girl from the Jewish people who she gets selected to go. Her name is Hadassah. She's an orphan, and she is a Jew, and she's raised by her cousin Mordecai. And she gets taken, and he tells her, conceal your identity. So she changes her name from Hadassah to Esther. And Esther goes and she lives in the palace. And you know what she does? She shows up, and she is a good Jewish girl. And so she says, I'm actually not going to eat that. I'm going to follow all of the right Jewish protocol, no matter the danger, because I'm a brave heroine of God. No, she does not do that. That sounds a lot like Daniel's story, right? The guy who he showed up in Babylon, and he fought the system and was vocal about his love for Jesus, but somehow still made it through. No, you know what Esther does? She does the most compliant things you could ever imagine. She puts herself through a year of beauty treatments. She makes herself the most well-liked among the person who's overseeing them. She does exactly what they say. She does not follow Jewish protocol. She goes and has sex unmarried with this king. And Esther gets to be chosen as queen. And eventually, throughout the rest of her story, she's kind of placed in a predicament where, these things start happening, and her cousin Mordecai, who's raising her, he overhears a plan of some guards who are trying to kill the king. And so somehow Esther all of a sudden goes in and warns him about what's going to happen, and she and Mordecai are praised because they just saved the king. And the other guys, they killed the other guys. It's very exciting. Y'all should read it on your own. So she earns kind of some more favor in this way. But eventually, what's going to happen is that Mordecai is going to be told through Mordecai in it's a long story, but basically there's a man who lives in the palace, and he is going to go after and basically genocide any Jew who lives in Persia. The entire Jewish people will be killed, it will be brutal, and it's going to happen in a year. And Mordecai comes to Esther, who has worked her way up to the top by being completely, she just forms herself into exactly what the Persian culture would want her to be, into exactly what King Xerxes would want her to be. And all of a sudden, he comes in and he says, Esther, you have to do something. And she wrestles. So we're going to read a little bit more of her story in a second, but I just want to point out a couple things about her before we get there. One of them is that so far, everything about Persian culture, King Xerxes, everything in that world is measured by appearance. It's by what things look like. Is there anywhere else that reminds you of? Things are always measured by what they see. And then another one, just to point out about kind of what Esther's story has built to now, but if you guys have watched VeggieTales like I have, I know she's really, yeah, okay. If you guys have any concept of what her story is, Esther comes away and she kind of has this name as she saved Israel. She saved the people of Israel. She's this brave woman. I have to tell you that these first three chapters in Esther's life, guys, hardcore, I'm going to use a word that has a lot of connotations, but take it as you will. Hardcore feminists, they look at Esther and they're like, that girl, bad on her. She should have stood up like Queen Vashti. She just let herself go to the system and be used and become part of it. She's not a brave heroine. She just became a part of the system. And then the really, biblical, Jewish, I don't know what you want to call them, they have criticism of her too. If she was really a woman of God, if she was really this remarkable person, she would have showed up at the palace and she would have done what Daniel did. She wouldn't have just given herself over to the culture that she lived in. She would have stood firm in the things that God had asked her to do. But she didn't. She compromised. She compromised over and over and over again. At this point in Esther's story, from either angle that you look at it, she's just completely missed it. She used her own beauty, which the Bible describes her as beautiful. She probably used some fear. She seems like an incredibly strategic woman with who she befriended and what she was able to do and accomplish and how she was able to win the favor of the king to climb to the top. It's a very real temptation that a lot of us fit in, but if we look at it scripturally, Esther, you missed it. Hadassah, you missed it. And she kind of comes to this point where now in the story, there's this actual conflict that she is going to face. And if you guys look with me in chapter 4, guys, she's just a really fascinating person to me. Okay, just got to say. If you guys will look with me in Esther chapter 4, we're going to be looking at halfway through verse 8. And basically what has happened is that genocide has been ordered. Mordecai has found out about it, and now he is sending somebody to go and tell Esther, this is what you have to do. So here's what's going to happen. He says, he told him to instruct her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. So Esther is queen. We find out here that there's this rule that you don't approach the king has to call for you. And if you do approach the king, and he extends you his scepter, then you're good. He's welcomed you into his presence. But if he doesn't, you're dead. Immediate death. So there's some intense risk here for Esther. She's climbed to the top. She lives in the palace. She's the queen. She's the chosen queen of Persia. And now we find out that just to approach the king to plead for something could mean her sudden death. Then we also find out in the passage that she hasn't even been called upon in 30 days. She's watched women after women after women be selected. She's over there wondering, are we good? She's not in a great standing. She doesn't know what King Xerxes is thinking about her. They're not staying up texting all night. She is not asking, what do you think about me now? Let's DTR again. My hair, okay. There is a real question. She doesn't know how she's going to be received. So she sends that back. Mordecai, how could you ask me to do that? Are you kidding me? That means sudden death for me. That's how things line up. That's what they're looking like. And then he responds back to her. It says this. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. This is rough, okay? Buckle up. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I'll go to the king, even though it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish. And the rest of the story is going to continue. She actually ends up strategically going in, and he receives her with the scepter, and she sets up these different meals, and she strategically works her way through the situation, and she pleads on behalf of her people as an incredibly brave woman who has just truly sacrificed, been willing to give up her entire life, everything she's worked for these last couple years, to the point where she would risk her death. She says, if I perish, I perish. And she saves the people of Israel. They're saved. Genocide doesn't happen. I don't know if you guys remember, but this whole sequence of events to even get Esther into this place started with a drunken party and a woman who said she wasn't going to go. Nothing to do with Esther. And then the sequence of events that she would just happen to be the person that King Xerxes would choose. And that Mordecai just so happened to have overheard this other conversation at one point. And that when she went into the room, somehow King Xerxes was in a mood that he would be willing to receive her and hand her the scepter. And that in just the right time, she was able to say just the right thing, that it ended up going in her favor. And we can look back on this story, and as we do, we give God all the credit of he had set up Esther for such a time as this. She was positioned in that royal position to save the people of Israel from genocide through which the bloodline of Jesus was able to carry on to get to this point today. She's a major character in the story, in our story. But it started at this drunken party that just opened that position up. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting to wonder how these things go together. And so, Jordan, I just want to point out, at this point I'm going to sit down because I've been standing for 15 minutes, and that's about 10 minutes longer than I usually do. Okay, so we're going to go through just a couple things. I'll probably get up in a minute because I don't like sitting in front of you. But just a couple things that I want to point out for us. And one of those things is that God is always at work despite what we see. That in all the ways that God might seem hidden, that God might seem silent, those things are not equal to his absence. I'd even like to just suggest to you, and I hope that you take this in the most kind, loving way, that perhaps you're there's a fog. You're I don't know what's happening. I don't know what the next step is. I don't know where God is moving or where God is leading me or how do I cooperate or what do I even praise? Like, God, even this is like morally ambiguous. Like, what's happening? And would I just urge you that maybe hiddenness is even a grace gift? I don't think Esther could have known that her call at one point was going to be to risk her own life. It probably was too much for her to know too early on. There's something about a hiddenness that could even be a grace gift to you. And so I just would encourage you, God's hiddenness is not his absence. That just because we perceive that God is silent, it doesn't mean that he's moving. He's very ever present, even in the details. And so I just want to urge us who live in a society where we judge things based off of what we can see. God is not limited by that. I will say that again. Where we judge things by what we can see, God is not limited by appearances. We find ourselves at just a speck in the timeline. I love even just Mordecai's approach. Like, who knows? You could have been appointed to this position for such a time as this. Like, how much of our lives are like, do we have the freedom to approach life with God by being like, who knows, God, but I'm here and I'm willing. Who knows, God, but I'm here and I'll use it. Who knows what you want to do with this and where you want to take this, but I am a willing participant in whatever you ask me to do. She was not always a willing participant. I also would like to just remind us that God, he does not give up on us. If he looked at the majority of her life and the things that she compromised on, the things that she just said, like, okay, I will sell my soul to the world system. Like, she actually, like, I hate to say it to her. If she's listening, I don't know how that works, but, like, she did. Like, ladies, I love you. Don't go selling your souls to, like, make yourself fit what the culture tells you is beautiful. Gentlemen, you too, okay? At the gym, I don't know what you guys do, okay? But, like, she did. She sold herself. She missed it. She did not stand firm to her beliefs. She hid her identity. She didn't want people to know she was a Jew. If you guys have heard about all of the customs of what it took to be a Jew following God, like, there were a ton. She could not have survived in the palace if she was doing that. She compromised on so many levels. She sold herself to the system. And yet, nowhere does God say you're disqualified because of what you've done, what you've chosen, or even where you're at right now. That doesn't happen. He also doesn't say, Esther, I'm going to use you because you're such a pious woman. Like, no. She's in a position, and he continues to give her opportunity to say yes to him. And you know what her first answer is? Esther is actually wrestling with this thing of, here's this world I have. Am I willing to give it up? And I'm just going to tell you this because it's not even a rhetorical question. There are parts of us, in each of us, that are actually sold to the world's system. We're sold to it. We want wealth. We want power. We want social status. Like, you're sold to it somehow. And even if you find it in, like, the church and it looks like its own thing, like, it's its own thing. We're sold to it. And so I'm not even going to ask you, are you sold to the world system? It's like, okay, well, to what extent? Because yes, we all are in some way. Like, there's no way to live here and not have some, like, part of our heart that's drawn towards it. Like, we just are. And so was she. And he continued to give her that invitation. But at this point, she's like, do I really want to give up my status? And Mordecai's response is basically like, if you don't, you're dead anyways. Like, it's already got you. You've already been got. So I just want to, like, tell that to us. Like, we've sold our souls somewhere. Like, where are we going to put our chips? He'll take you along. You're not disqualified based on your past or your piety. And finally, God's purposes require sacrifice. That I do believe God continues to extend and extend and extend opportunities to join in with what he's doing in a saving, like a redemptive way. God is still writing a redemptive story, and I believe that he invites us into it. But it does require sacrifice. That she gets to a point where she looks at, this is everything I've earned in the world. I've made it to the top. This is much is required of me. What will she do? And she eventually, through God just so kindly bringing her along and inviting her, she decides and she gets to the place where she actually says, if I perish, I perish. That's not how she showed up to the palace. She showed up to the palace not saying, if I perish because I'm a Jew, I perish. She showed up hiding her identity and selling herself to the system. She's now at a place where she says, if I perish, I perish. There's a level of sacrifice that's required when we say yes to Jesus, when we say yes to God. And so we've been really excited here at the Jordan about this is Esther's story. This is what we're invited into. But kind of taking a look at what does that say for us as a community? What does that say for you? And so Jordan, I've got a couple little more things about what this says for us, but I will speak from somebody who has now been at the Jordan for several years. I love this place so much. Has anybody been here longer than 2 years? Okay? Wait, can you actually raise your hand high? My friends in the front. Okay, if you're not going to raise your hand high, okay, thank you. Those are actually my friends. I'm mad at them. Okay, you guys, hold on. Let's just look around at each other for a second. Guys, we've been through things, okay? If you are new here and you started coming in the last year, will you raise your hand? You guys, that is so encouraging. Welcome. Welcome. I know, you're like, I've been coming for 10 months. I don't feel new anymore, but here we are. Guys, we're so glad you're here. This ministry has been on a wave of where is God and what is he doing? Where God has absolutely seemed hidden, yet he's provided for us every step along the way. And we find ourselves. And our pastor Damien, he has been using this phrase over and over and over again, that the team, that each one of you filling a seat here tonight, each one of you who raised their hands as somebody who has been here 2.5 years ago and is somehow still sitting in the room, no matter how much change you've seen. And for those who are brand new, that tonight is your very first night, shout out Sebastian. And tonight is your very first night, and you're like, yeah, I'm here. That we, each of us, have been brought here, who knows, for such a time as this. And that no matter how much change our ministry has gone on, that the young adults of our church in North County, San Diego, and I know those of you who drive up from Point Loma, that there are young adults in our area, that there are young adults sitting in the very seat that you are currently sitting in, meaning you, that God is doing something. That he is meeting us, that he is continuing to provide, and I mean this not from a place of I work here, so you're welcome, but think about it, you guys, that there is a place for you as a young adult to go and worship and hear from the word of God. That is a gift to you. I hope you receive it from the Lord. He is doing something, and he has brought each of us here for such a time as this, and so I hope that you guys are attentive to that. That this isn't by accident, that we could have looked back at these last year and even just thought about the one time Damien came literally just to guest speak, even though you guys think every guest speaker is someone we're trying to hire. Not true. But that's how that started, through a random connection of somebody who's not even at our church anymore. That's crazy. And brought just piece by piece along of different people that he brought to the team, and maybe some have since left, but were an integral part through a huge time of transition. And he's brought us here for such a time as this, that God would continue to use the Jordan and use North Coast to reach people around us and to reach you. I hope this is a place where God reaches you, where you can be here during worship, you can sit during a sermon, where you can go to a life group and be a part of a community, and you can experience this I'm seen. God sees me. He knows me. He's moving. I pray, God, I pray right now that this would be a place where God uses for such a time as this in your life. and to touch the lives of people around you and people in our county and at your school and at your work and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so there's one. Also, Esther for the Jordan, you know how she wasn't perfect? Neither are we. I'm sorry if you've ever walked in here and have not been greeted. I'm sorry if it took you like 2 months to be like coming in and sneaking in the door before anybody ever talked to you. We're not perfect. But like, if we keep saying yes to God, maybe he's going to continue to use us. And so let's just have that as a fair expectation of one another. And I just want to invite you that even though we're not perfect and he's brought us here for such a time as this, like, is this a place that you want to consider stepping into the purposes that God has for you here? I think there's some like really simple ways to do that. Maybe instead of just talking to the person that you walk into, you take the brave step and talk to the person who's like 2 seats down from you because you have to have the buffer. You have to have the buffer seat. It's important because the worship hand's anything. But just do it. Like, take that step. Make this place yours. Come to the family meeting. And then, Jordan, I also just want to remind you for you that God is always with you. He is always moving, and it may be so foggy, and we hate it. And we hate wondering, like, what are you doing, God? Like, are you playing tricks on me? We hate that feeling. God is he is so much bigger than that. And I love that we talked about that, even with the battle earlier, like he is so much bigger, and yet he wants to know, okay? If you are frustrated, if you just desperately desire clarity from God, if you say, God, I want to see you moving, and I am wrestling because I don't know where you're moving, tell him that and wait on him. Guys, I recently was just told this, like we get to wrestle and we get to question God and have real questions for him from a place, like when we're in a place of like securely actually trusting him. So if you're actually wrestling with those questions, good for you. Like, God is moving in your life. Attend to those. That could be the Holy Spirit stirring something deep, like asking you to go deeper with God. If you're in the fog and you hate it, tell him that you hate it. If you're in the fog and you want some clarity, ask him for clarity. And in the meantime, we can say, God, I judge by appearances, but you don't. And you're going to carry me through this, as I've seen you done before. But we're going to be honest with him. And this is the one that I really want to end on, because this is probably my favorite thing about this story. I think a lot of us can hear a thing about Esther, and we're like, yeah, I'm going to be people who are like, if I perish for you, God, and for your people. I'll give up all myself for you, which I do think there's an invitation here. We see saying yes to God involves sacrifice, absolutely. But the last thing I would want is for anybody to walk out these doors and feel like, I'm going to be part of the Jordan. I'm going to be a part of Jesus in my workplace. I'm going to defy the world system so that I can say yes to God and all these things, because there's some level of like guilt. But instead, would we just be people who receive the truth that there was one person who has perfectly followed this statement, if I perish, and he did on your behalf? That we get to sit here as people who are failures, who have totally missed it, who have spent a lot of our lives missing it, and we have someone who's not only still inviting us, but who has gone before us as someone who says, if I perish, I'll perish. His name is Jesus. He took death so that you could have a redemptive story and join in his. That is crazy. So if there is one thing we hear tonight, we get to, I'm going to tell you 3 things we hear tonight. We get to hear that God is not concerned with appearances, but he is moving regardless of what we see. And we get to hear that this world system is not all it's cracked up to be, but we get to be invited into something that does involve sacrifice, but only because we've had someone who has gone and paid the ultimate actual sacrifice for us. So as we get to come before God again in worship, I want you guys to wrestle a little bit with this. God, how are you moving? Am I mad that I can't see something? Is something clear to me and obvious? Do I feel like you're playing tricks on me? Let's do that. Let's have some honesty with him as we're working through this in worship. And similarly to Esther, who missed it for a lot of her life story, and eventually got to the place where she was willing to let it all go behind her for the sake of other people and for the sake of herself too. Is there an area that you've sold yourself? Is there an area of this world or appearances that has its hook in you, that's holding you back from the freedom of giving to life, live life with Jesus as someone who says, if I perish, I perish? Only because the person who did the ultimate perishing has already done it for you. I'm going to pray for us, and we're going to respond in a time of worship. So, Father, I thank you, and I pray over each of us in this room who have lived stories, God. We've been places. God, we've missed it so terribly in so many ways. God, there are temptations everywhere. God, we want the right job. We want the right friends. We want the right sexual expression. God, we want to be beautiful and seen. God, we want wealth and power. God, we are so enticed. And yet, God, you invite us into a redemptive story. And so we praise you as the ultimate Redeemer, Lord. I ask that you would come and you would shed light in our hearts on the exact thing that you would like to bring healing to, that you would like to bring freedom to. And God, we thank you that you are willing to forsake everything and every part of this world and every power and prestige and position that you were earned and deserved, God, on our behalf. And we receive that tonight, Lord.